see what I'm doing.
What you thought about the summit? With those 3 days meant to you?
So I'm starting. My name is Rex Redbird. I'm from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. My thoughts on the summit this year was that last year I thought it was way better than what it was this year. Last year they offered a more variety of speakers as far as, creative arts go. There was a famous comic book artist there last year. And this year just seemed like, it was, a lot of the speakers were shoehorned in, so it was, it was just kind of like a mess, especially with some of the speakers that were put in. It seemed like they weren't given the exact amount of time that they were given. Like it wasn't clear enough to how long they could speak, so they just rushed through their whole presentation. As far as everything else, I thought it was okay, the free stuff. I went through it like 3 times. So, but to me, it was just, last year was just way better than this year. I felt this year was just kind of like a waste of time.
Okay. I'm Tori Gray, and this is the first time I've went to the summit, I think. And personally, I thought it was a very good place to socialize with other people, but then again, I don't socialize. So I really didn't, and I just kept to myself, and I missed the first day of the summit, and it was very confusing, and so I had to like step out and ask. People were very nice, but then when I went into the speakers' rooms, like it was very clustered. Some of them people were standing in some of them because some like other presentations just didn't seem interesting. So clearly that kind of shows that they have to have like a sporadic different not just pretty much like healthcare and the reservation stuff. Like we need to go more out there with something to like intrigue students to go, like actually go, not just forcing them to go just to do a paper.
My name is Albert Martinson, and I went to the summit, most of it anyway. I thought it was pretty ironic that it was based on leadership, and especially Native leadership, sure, culturally relevant, absolutely, but I thought it was ironic that the big message was leadership, and I find it's ironic because how poorly planned it was. There was a lack of leadership. First day, I got there early, and I go in there, the line, they got 3 computers. They had 3 computers. That line stretched all the way to the back of the next room, and then it started curling back again. I just went and sat in my truck for a little while. I come back, it was still just as long, so I guess I'm just gonna have to grind and get in this line. Waste of time, to be honest. As soon as I got in, I go upstairs. First thing I did was there was no speakers because there's two people giving presentations, and they are both full out the door because everybody needs to get this paper. Last year there was like 20 people that just dropped classes because they couldn't get this paper in. Last year you missed a day, you couldn't make it. It was worth it coming last year because you'd learn things. I actually got like a job opportunity. I figured out I wanted to be an engineer from what I learned last year. This year, boring. It was stupid. So I go in this big room. Last year it was insane. You could barely walk around in there, There was, every stall had somebody to tell you something about somewhere, They had Native American engineers, they had women's studies and the cultural, differences between this tribe and their women. They had art, they had amazing digital art from this school. But this year, it was about 10 o'clock when this guy pulled his Toyota Camry, pulling a trailer for Verizon in it, and he pulled it in there, and he could drive it in there because there was nobody in there. He probably could have got 3 more cars in that thing. It was so empty. And by the time I could actually get into a room to listen to a mandatory talk to save my grade, to get my whole future thing in college, by the time I got in there, they said it was lunchtime. So they break for lunch, and there's some lady saying, "Sorry guys, lunch is canceled." So I went home and I stayed home. And that was my experience, 2 days. I didn't go the 3rd day. Waste of time. Doesn't happen. Kenyon?
My name is Kenyon Uzero. My experience from the summit, in my personal opinion, it was my first time going. To me, it was the session I went to was very educational. It dealt with a lot of, what do you call it? Ideals with the students and the instructors. How one student can be higher on another learning level than another student, and they're just sitting there teaching at the level of the highest student, and one student falls behind because he does not have that learning experience as another. And so you start to recognize as during the class that you can see the difference between some students and why some are falling back. I agree with Albert on one thing with the lack of leadership in it. They were just kind of just blurting out random items and hopefully begging that you would understand what they were talking about. And in all complete open mind, I had no idea what was going on. There was maybe 3 or 4 parts that I completely agreed with. The main part I really agreed with during this session was when they were talking about the teaching and learning during classes with students and between students and instructors. How an instructor can teach one student at a higher level that they would understand, and how they can go to another student and teach them at their level, bringing them up into which they're both all sort of equal, on an equal level. But what they mainly forget is that they're more focusing on inside of the class and what goes on in it, but they don't focus on what goes on the outside, and whether if they will take this information and bring it into the open world out there. They think that you just shove it in one classroom and hope for the best, which honestly, that's not how learning goes, and that's not how leadership goes. With leadership, you have to show them the way, you have to lead that path, lay that path in front of them, be sure and send them on that way, guide them through it. You can't just expect them to walk on it and then stay on the path throughout the rest of their life. Another thing I agree with Albert on is the fact that they just kind of shoved it all in, and the line was terrible. I didn't go the next 2 days because it was boring. They lost me from the first 5 minutes. Like I said, only 3 parts of that whole session kind of caught me, and I just thought it wasn't worth going. But pretty much the only session that caught me was the Indian of Education on North Dakota. That's the only one that ever caught me. There's only 3 parts of that whole session. And it said 50 minutes, but ended up taking an hour and 30, which was kind of longer than I expected. And they were just jotting down. They missed a lot of cultural facts. They missed a lot of cultural things. But the good thing about that, what good came out of it was, like I said, they were just focusing more on between the student and instructor education. Pass.
My name's Berlin West. I'm from Cheyenne University Tribe. And I went to the summit and I thought it was interesting. I went to it before. I do think there was a lack of leadership. I think the biggest fault in the leadership was knowing your audience. I think that they should have prepared that students are coming and it's not our career and we're still figuring out what we want to do, so make it enticing. I don't think that if they kind of spoke on whatever their subjects were, kind of more on a colleague, kind of like, you know what I'm talking about, but we don't know what you're talking about. We're trying to figure out what we want to do. I think the variety of topics, there wasn't a big, it was kind of more towards like energy and sustainability type of deal, I think. I do think it would have been cooler to have other natives doing other things. I think the culture was just right, I think it could have been better if it's their, like 50th annual. It should have been way better organized. The line should have been planned out. There should have been way more than 3 computers. If there's at least 500 students showing up, you need more than 3 computers, plus the outside people that are coming in. I also think another thing that kind of would have helped it is when they serve breakfast. There should have been an agenda of what's going on today and what you can go to, versus giving students this piece of paper and expecting them to read all this little print of this not very well designed piece of paper, and then expecting them to know which ones they want to go to, because sometimes the titles were completely misleading. And I went to the one about cultural relevancy in art, and I didn't know what that was gonna be about, but it kind of sounded almost interesting. But I don't think a lot of people knew, we made bracelets,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't be able to assume that from the title. I really think they should have worked on their titles. They should have had a clear plan of, like, a clear timeline of, like, lunch is gonna be this time, and this is the time lunch is gonna be. Sessions are gonna be this long, and that's how long you have, or like have a time or something, a clock or something for people to reference off of. And people ushering, like, at least, I don't know, like student ambassadors or like employees ushering students of saying, okay, session, whatever, whatever, starting now upstairs. Because a lot of it was students asking other students what nobody knew, and then, you know, we don't know what we don't know. But all in all, I think it, if you like push through the lulls and the confusion and like the boring, some great opportunities would come out of it. It was good for networking. Yeah, I just think that on a leadership thing, you know, even if it's gonna be a big event like this, I think it should have been hashed out and like practiced by people running it before it actually happened versus, you know, them running it and then first run is when everybody shows up. And I feel like they should have went there like a couple days ahead of time and gave people time to do things, and like explained what was out there, because there was these posters that were the history of United Tribes Technical College that like nobody knew, and there was this huge list of names that they just kind of became background imagery, you know, they weren't really what people were like, oh, look at this poster, look at this. Yeah, I do feel like mealtimes was really important because a lot of us are college students and like meals are a precious commodity. So I really think that that should have been hashed out, and you should have thought if you're inviting your entire student body, you have to feed your entire student body, because a lot of us are from the dorms, you know, or living on your own, and our meals are like strictly planned. And like if we don't have one, then we're like SOL until the next time the cafeteria is open. And then we're off campus, some people didn't have cars, so it's like you're stuck at this building that you have no idea what you're doing. I think it would have been nice to have like breakout sessions or like some sort of interactive thing besides just speakers talking at students. But overall, I think it was an okay experience. It wasn't like the best thing in the world. It wasn't something that I would like skip class to go do. But because it was a grade requirement, I had to. But I think if it was well planned out and kind of geared more towards the student body, then it would have been way more successful.
Any question, answers from the audience?
You were like